And we're live, and the site is live, and the league is live, and the trades are live, and the tags are live, and everything is alive and crazy. And I love all you degenerates so much. That's all I have to say about the last probably 100 hours of the league. But we're going to go into it in a little bit more detail than that. You've got the Vikings, Eagles, and Panthers on. Probably go more than the 20 or 30 minutes we've done recently, but not going to get too long tonight. We'll save some of the draft coverage for later pods. And this one, we're really going to focus on kind of what's happened since rollover, how it feels to have so much bleeding money, and, the big names and the big pieces being moved around and repositioning, and what it's kind of done to the shape of the league right now. So glad you guys could join. This would not be fun to do by myself because it's just going to be fun to talk about this. And it's fun that this level of peace keeps moving around in our league.
Yeah, it's crazy is an understatement for the things that have happened in this league in the past few days. But it's definitely fun to be a part of.
'Tis the truth. So we'll start at kind of rollover itself. We were waiting for the finalization of what the cap was going to be next year, and the NFL announced a massive jump. I think it was $250 million plus for the salary cap next year, which converted to a salary cap for us of $214,536,000. So just about everybody was walking into the new league year with at least $35 million in cap space. But for those of us who had big cap penalties getting cleared or massive contracts expiring, it was going to be hard to spend this money fast enough. So what a great time to have the franchise tags start to come out. But before that, the holdout generator, which just all forms of entertaining, except if you had a player in the holdout generator, and then it was terrible. And, whether you call it the darkest outcome or the darkest timeline or just the most fun one, unfortunately for Commanders, he got tagged.
Yep. All is right in the world now. A lot of players are adequately priced, but it is unfortunate for the players that did decide to hold out, or the owners of those players.
Yep. And again, the details are there. And so, yes, the players that were tagged with holdouts, Jalen Hurts, Alvin Kamara, Evan Ingram, Justin Madubuike, Ed Oliver, Bobby Wagner, Jonathan Allen, the Titans punter. Yes, the Titans punter that 49ers franchised exclusively instead of Brock Purdy. We'll go back to that in a second. Then, let's see, Raheem Mostert, Carl Granderson, Robert Spillane, and Jordan Whitehead, as well as L'Jarius Sneed. So a much larger collection of holdouts this year versus years past. I think last year was probably 2 or 3 players, and maybe that the year before. But some big holdouts, and none bigger than the Jalen Hurts holdout, because that adjusts his contract from less than $1 million to probably league standard in the 30s.
Yeah, massive change. Definitely took probably what was the most valuable offensive asset. Definitely diminished the price. I wouldn't say he's worthless by any stretch, but definitely hurt that appeal.
No, for sure. And, it's tough luck, but God, if somehow, he got through that and didn't hold out, it was going to set up perfectly for Commanders to, hold him one way or the other and, extend him at the end of the year after 8 games potentially. Because if after 8 games he's still on kind of a Pro Bowl pace, you just bite the bullet and make sure you can hang on to him. And if not, then you maintain just incredible salary structure for him at a discount. But tough luck. Jags can still do that, I guess, with Kyron Williams or a couple other of the well-priced contracts still are clear in the league, but big one off the table. Any other thoughts about the holdouts?
Alvin Kamara went from what felt like a steal to, I don't know, kind of an unappealing contract given his situation right now.
It's not terrible. I mean, given a situation, yes, but it's $18.5 million, which, again, considering like Browns, for example, right now was a playoff team last year, didn't lose a lot of his pieces off of his team, has $76 million in cap space and is paying Alvin Kamara 18.5. So is it a worse contract? No question about it. Is it a bad contract? Well, I think I would almost say in the new salary cap era in the league, that's adequate pricing on a player of that caliber. And even if he's only got a year left, that's not a bad price to pay for that production. I mean, we just saw, we'll get to this a little bit more later, David Montgomery, what his price is, plus a first to go get him. So if we're going to pay that much versus what we're paying for Kamara, this may be the better bargain.
Oh, definitely the better bargain when you're comparing it to franchise tags. Just an $18 million Kamara, and we don't know where he's going to be next year or this coming year. It's far worse than, what was he, $11 million?
Either way, I think that's a good point.
Just one of the more prominent holdouts, so feels worse for those two rather than the rest of the players.
Yep. And then I'm sure this happened with a couple other teams, but because I am this playing owner, I did get the enjoyment of he was already franchise tagged, so he was already the second most expensive linebacker in the league, and he held out. Gotta love it. Hey, you're getting paid the second most in the league. It's not number one. I'm holding out. I'm not reporting to camp. Like, imagine the real life story about that. That would be fantastic.
I find that hilarious.
Nonetheless, but we get clear of the holdouts, and next up are the tags. And this is where the real fun began. So players who are on non-exclusive franchise tags, which for those listening who may not be as familiar, mean that you have to pay up to get the player and you have to provide a first-round pick in compensation for the player, and then the current owner gets to decide if they want to take the pick or re-sign the player at the increased contract value. So that being said, most of the non-exclusive free agent bids went unopposed. Real quick, we'll hit them. L'Jarius Sneed, Cowboys kicker, EJ Speed, Justice Hill, Darren Bland, Julian Love, Jordan Whitehead, James Conner, Robert Spillane, Carl Granderson, Jonathan Cooper, and Dante Stills. Again, these are good players at their position, but I don't think there's any future where anyone would give up a first-round pick for those players, irregardless of an inflated salary. So I don't think any major surprises there.
Nope.
Now, where there's been some active back and forth in bidding for these players, we've got David Montgomery, who I believe is still active. Has he expired yet? I don't think so. I think, the most recent bid on him was at 10 o'clock this morning, 11 o'clock this morning. So he's got until, I think, 11 tomorrow morning. But he's sitting at $31 million and the 126 right now. Again, that's increased pretty drastically from, I think, a $16 million bid that Broncos had put initially. And then the other one, which is just bravo. You all are amazing. This was exceeded all of our expectations. We joked about this. We hypothesized about this, but we did not expect it to go to this level. Brock Purdy, the new QB1 in contract value for $116 million and $50,000 as a salary this year on a 2-year deal. So again, we're projecting potential contracts for this next round of quarterbacks in the 250s to 300s range. Again, Brock Purdy just got that 10-year contract in 2 years. So good for you, Brock. You've been the butt of everyone's joke as Mr. Irrelevant and as a minimum salary player. You're not anymore, at least not in our league.
Yeah. I don't know what to say at this point. That price is.
I just love the variety of teams that were involved too, though. So Colts was the original bidder. I jumped in for a couple of bids. Pats then jumped back in. Broncos was involved. The three of them went back and forth. I jumped in for a round. These guys made me sweat for a couple of hours. Then basically came down to Pats and Colts, and I applaud Pats for being bold in his decisions. He's got what appears to be a very good 24-year-old quarterback. Yeah, it's going to be expensive as hell, but with 2 renegotiations, going to bring him right back in line with probably average price for a top 10 QB, and we'll have him for 4 or 5 years. So, look, injuries suck, and bad luck happens sometimes, but he's on a pretty good path to having pretty good control of the franchise quarterback, and taking maybe 2 years to really build around him.
I mean, I just hope the renegotiation works out the right way, because that is, I don't know, that's a ridiculous price. I don't think it's a terrible idea for Pets to do that, but it's going to be a long process. What is it? A minimum of two renegotiations to get him back to a reasonable price.
True. Again, it's just gonna be fun to watch because again, Purdy played very well last year, and I think from a scoring perspective, most look at him as a top 10, top 12 quarterback option going into next year. Having one of those locked up for the long term is very nice. Getting those for what basically amounts to cap space and the 27th pick is even nicer. It's just going to be a matter of if he's got to hang on to the job. San Francisco is going to start hitting some cap hell here as Kittle ages and probably still wants to get paid a decent amount. Debo is racking up the beating. Ayuk needs to get paid. Trent Williams is getting paid a ton for a tackle. The defense has got to get paid, and then Purdy's got to get paid in real life. So if San Francisco keeps proving the cap is fake, then it's a fantastic buy. If Purdy gets too good and makes the Pro Bowl, that delays things a little bit for the 49ers, but especially since the new legislation this past year that with because of Pro Bowl or because of things like that, contracts can't get better. Like he's obviously far and away the QB1 contract right now. So if the average of the top 5 or top 3, whatever it is, that would actually amount to a huge reduction. So the fact that you can't reduce a contract because of the Pro Bowl now puts a little bit more risk on this.
Yep. Yeah, it's. I mean, I'm interested to see what Pat's going to do because he still has $40 million, and he has like half of a roster right now. So it's kind of interesting.
Again, he's in his shuffling around. He's picked up a couple more picks, so I think he'll be able to convert those to some cheap players where they need to be, and then make some smart buys in free agency. He's been good at kind of finding the players he wants to get in those, and some of them have been real steals at an undervalued price. Some of them not so much, but it's always fun to see Pat's work his magic.
He has 2 more first-round picks this year, right?
At least 2, I think. Yeah, I think he's got 2 more this year and 1 next year. I think it's Giants first.
If he turns those into like a decent wide receiver and a decent running back, that team's pretty good and positioned well in the AFC East. Because there isn't a team in the East that like stands out as like, oh yeah, this team is better than the rest. They're all kind of like, whether they're starting to rebuild and they're like in the midst of tearing it down, their team looks half decent, or if they're just finishing up a rebuild, like all of the teams are just kind of average. So Pats definitely has a chance to just win that division with his team and $100+ million quarterback.
I mean, let's just enjoy this, and we're gonna touch on this a little bit more later. The first 3 picks in the draft are coming from the NFC East right now, and the 4th team is the Cowboys. So who the hell knows what your teams are going to look like and who the front runner is at this point? Because Giant seems committed to actually tearing this down a little bit and rebuilding through the draft, or he's doing what he does every year of acquiring a top 3 pick and sitting on the clock and waiting for someone to pay up for it. Hopefully that's not the case this year, and he's actually going for a player that he's going a little bit younger with his squad, but younger than Josh Allen and less productive than Josh Allen means a little bit more opening for Cowboys to step up, you to step up, or Commanders having a ton of picks to really shape the team they want to. So the East is going to be interesting, starting with the draft. All right, let's touch on the transition tag players real quick. Cavante Turbin, Shavarius Ward, Eric Armstead, Marshawn Lattimore, Kendrick Bourne, Josh Reynolds, and Brevin Jordan as the transition tag guys. A couple of these are still open. But surprisingly, a couple of matches, since these didn't require, or you don't get draft compensation for these, a lot more matching going on here. I think everyone who got bid on a transition tag got matched.
Brevin Jordan's $21 million. What is this league now?
I don't remember. I think he's still on the real life Texans, and I think Schultz is a free agent, so I think that's what people are banking on. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure what his current team is in our league format. But
he's a transition tag. He's bid up to $21 million right now.
Right, but again, the team that owns him currently that would have to choose to match the tag.
Oh, whoever it is, they're a lunatic if they match him.
Yeah. So, but couple auctions still going, and then the offseason will continue. Nonetheless, really fun. In the real football world, we're getting some movement to combine, so some rookie fever and rookie hype definitely going to start jumping up a little bit. But it's the most wonderful time of the year. And it's fun to restart a league season here and see as free agency kicks in and as we get closer to the draft and learn more and more about these prospects, how things end up shuffling. Any league year thoughts you have, RJ, before we jump into the 20 trades that have happened?
No, not particularly.
All right. So as mentioned, 20 trades going down since we last potted, which was a couple hours before the deadline at the end of last week, which I think was midnight on Wednesday going into Thursday. So again, we'll touch on the one trade that's on last year's page because it's a bit of a doozy, but by no means does that minimize any the trades that have happened this year, because in those 19 trades are some really big names and some really big picks, including 2 top 5 picks, and everything's flying everywhere. So like I said, I love you all. You're wonderful degenerates, and this is what makes this league so much fun. Starting off with the last trade of last year, it's me and Raiders. My sending DK Metcalf and Mike Evans to the Raiders as they give up on Jonathan Taylor, Alex Pierce, Cole Holcomb, and their 25 first. Again, I'm moving anything and everything. I'm just a clearinghouse at this point. So both of those pieces were acquired and were going to be shipped out. It puts Raiders in a great position with Lamar, Charbonnet, two pretty strong receivers and some younger depth, and then really a pretty decent defense. He's well positioned to maintain some strong play in the AFC West. My love for Jonathan Taylor knows no bounds. I wanted to start looking at some 25 firsts, and then a couple of other pieces I thought were maybe a little bit undervalued. So I enjoyed it. I also wouldn't have made the deal, but keeping the big names moving around here is what we endeavor to do from this podcast.
Yeah, I think it was a great trade for you. We definitely like the idea of bringing Taylor in and getting a Raiders pick next year. I have no complaints over it. I'm sorry, I'm really thrown off by the chat and how people didn't know who Brevin Jordan is. That saddens me more than his cost.
Well, I think the demand though on the bidding war at least makes up for it. It makes him feel pretty good. That being said, about feeling good, Titans has been sitting on a couple of pending trades for, I feel like it's been months, but it's probably just been a couple of weeks. Get processed almost immediately, giving the 126 to the Broncos for Amari Cooper, and then giving the 127, 402, and the Chiefs 25 first for Alan McNeil, Josh Allen, and Nate Hobbs and Reed Blankenship. So gives up two late firsts and probably a projected late first and a fourth to pick up a starting receiver, starting D tackle, one of the top edges in the league, and two other productive defensive players. So Colts really trying to round his team together. Titans starting to round his team together into a competing force in 2024.
Yeah, definitely some interesting trades. I don't know how I feel about the one with Colts. That feels like a little bit much just to buy some defensive players where like everybody but Josh Allen you could probably find for slightly more expensive in free agency, comparable players. But I do agree that it feels like it's been a long time waiting for these. Maybe it's just the amount of emergency podcasts we've had to do recently, but these are trades that a lot of us have known about for a while. I like the Cooper for 126. That seems pretty much even.
I mean, he's definitely, he's one of these late 20, early 30s receivers in that sort of sweet spot that for a year or two, because you've got a 29 or a 30 in front of your name, everyone else says ew. But you pick them for a late first and they score 220, 250 points for you. And that's wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 numbers for the year. So tell you what, the price is right. And if you are trying to position your team as a playoff team, those are the kind of pieces you need to buy at those prices.
Yep.
All right. Continuing right along. Colts was, again, positioning himself for the Purdy sweepstakes, so gives up the 27th pick to me for 32, picking up a third in the process. Again, if the plan was to, move down on the pick you were going to put into a compensation for a franchise tag player, picking up a free third in the process, smart idea.
Yeah, feels a bit cheap for 127, but also if the intention was just to be gotten rid of that pick due to bidding, just netting a third is perfectly fine.
Yeah. And then Panthers making some back-to-back deals, picking up Sam Howell and Javon Hargrave for the 223, and then picking up Jonathan Taylor for me for Chase Brown in the 112. He's been trying to grab a high-end running back to really balance out the rest of his roster for the last couple of weeks. Was patient on some of the RB2 offers and gets himself, I think, one of the guys who is an RB1 regardless in my book, but one of the few that, because of the way he's utilized, could end up being the RB1 league wide next year. So great piece to add.
Yeah, I mean, it's about fair value for Taylor. I don't know if you still have that 12, but I'm interested to see what that turns into. I wouldn't be shocked if at that range you're taking the RB1. And not to say that that RB like will pan out to be Jonathan Taylor, but whenever you can just trade off one of the better running backs to basically get 3+ years younger, I like that.
Well, again, I like Chase Brown. I wasn't, a huge fan of the price for him when he was drafted, but he performed well in partial duty. And do we think they're going to re-sign Mixon with all the other running backs out there? Now, that's not saying that he's going to be the RB1 in Cincinnati. I don't think that's the case. I think, with the names out there, Cincinnati is going to end up with one of them. But he's going to have a role, and he's going to be productive. And depending on which one of these guys he gets, that role could be 150 to 200 touches. It could be 200 to 250 touches. Who knows?
You already sold him. You don't have to talk him up.
Well, that's fair. I try and do that with everybody, not just the guys that I get. Let's see. Commanders jumping back in, moving one of his flock of DNs to the Chiefs for Eddie Jackson, the Chiefs 25 second and the 431. Again, Chiefs going and getting adequately priced defensive players, less than $3 million for the D end on the other side of Micah Parsons, who isn't too shabby himself. So makes a lot of sense. Good price for Goose, good sale for Commander since he's got a lot of depth at that position. Just makes a lot of sense for a trade.
Yep. Fantastic price for Lawrence. Unfortunately, it's not the Lawrence of, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, but still a relevant producer in the league. Love that contract. So definitely still worth a second round. A little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. Then we've got a cap dump. Titans moving off of Tyus Bowser for the Ivo 2, giving those over to the Dolphins. Pats, in deciding to get into the Brock Purdy sweepstakes, I guess you could call it. Dontravian Wicks in the 127 from me to the Pats for Zach Moss, Trey Hendrickson, and EJ Speed. This dumped about $30 million of cap on me from Pats. But again, when Trey Hendrickson is a sweeter to make that happen. And look, Zach Moss was productive last year in the role that Indy had him in. So he may find a spot either there or somewhere else and be productive again. If not, okay, it's a $12 million hit that goes down to $6 million hit. Ho-hum. And EJ Speed, at some point, someone's going to look at the linebacker rankings and say, oh, crap, this is really thin and I need more depth here. So until then, I'm just going to keep adding middle linebackers and waiting for people to come say hi.
I mean, eventually somebody will come to the realization that he's one of like 15 inside linebackers that are still on under contract for next year, like productive ones in the league, and they'll want him and they'll pay a reasonable price for him. Not the biggest fan of like his contract, but somebody's going to trade extend him when they get him. Trey Hendrickson, at least in my eyes, was the bulk of the value here, but like the throw-ins were fantastic. Like Moss is probably going to be a 500+ yard a season guy, so somebody's definitely going to want him. $15 million is a bit much, but eventually somebody will need him. We'll pay a reasonable price, so you'll definitely get more than the 127 and the fourth best wide receiver on a roster.
And Wicks did end the season on a pretty strong note. In the last 5 games, had 4 touchdowns and I think 200 to 300 yards. So yes, he's the 3rd or 4th receiver on that team, but it's not exactly like a normal fourth receiver. Like we're not talking, Darius Davis points where, dear God, hopefully he gets involved in the return game. This is actually getting some targets and some high value targets.
Definitely a stud. Unfortunately, that whole wide receiver core is studs from like 1 to 4 or something like that. So he's worth far more than nothing, and far more than what his draft capital was last year. Uh, but probably less than the 127, at least in the context of this trade.
Well, yeah, and I mean Edge. That's the thing with Hendrickson, which is going to be interesting for me. And I still have him, so obviously, this is not me trying to sell him and then saying something that may have dropped his price. Clearly, is against my best interest, but hey, it's for the pod. Look, edges were scarce as all heck, especially those who scored over 220 points last year, especially those that cost less than $1 million on their cap number. There were, I think, one, maybe two of those total available in the league. Now, with the change of putting of rush outside linebackers as DNs, things have gotten a lot deeper. So there's a lot more teams who have 2 or 3 guys in the 100 to 200 range, and that's what you need in that spot, which is fine. But the elite is still the elite, and a lot of that elite is guys who were, DNs last year. So is he top 10? Yes. Is he worth a mid to late first instead of a early first like he was last year? Probably. But, I think people are still trying to figure out what the true position values are going to be.
Yeah, he's definitely still worth quite a bit. The only thing that's changed with him is his age. Everything else is he's still a top tier edge player, and regardless of how many edges there are, the top tier are still extremely valuable.
Yep. Again, Patriots making moves, breaking down Jalen Waddle for the 122 and the Giants first in 25. Again, with Giants starting to tear some major pieces down off of his roster. Again, he's not hurting in any way, shape, or form, but the NFC East is not the shoe-in for him that it was previously. So that may be a savvy pick, but otherwise, compared to, I think it was kind of the 108-ish value that he gave up to get Waddle in the first place, he's got to hope that the Giants pick really kicks in there as a non-playoff team to make that balance out.
Yep, I can agree with that. It gave Patriots a little bit of flexibility to buy more stuff, not as valuable stuff as Waddle, but breaking it down into 2 different pieces that are still worth a first is, always good.
Moving right along, Dolphins trying to move back in the draft or out in the draft. Willing to take the Raiders 25 fifth, as well as a couple other 5th round picks as sweeteners to move the 123 to me as I continue to try and reclaim my 7 or 8 first round picks that I had at one point before I lost my mind 2 years ago. But I think we're getting close here. But nonetheless, happy to buy a pick in that range. And Dolphins has really been pivoting towards, getting his picks in the 25 draft. So he accumulates there. So fun little win-win. So for those still listening, it's been a crazy, some big players, big names. Here's where we just completely lose our minds, except for 1 or 2 smaller things in here. This is just straight silliness for the last 9. The 105 moving for Jared Goff, Tank Bigsby, and Will McDonald. So again, for those keeping score at home, that's Jared Goff. That I, being one of them, thinking that Hendon Hooker was being drafted there to replace him. Jared Goff, who I think is going to the final year of his deal and has not signed an extension this offseason. Jared Goff, who led Detroit to the NFC Championship and darn near the Super Bowl, and whose weapons keep getting older and more experienced and better. Plus a very good D end and a first round D end in the NFL draft, and Tank Bigsby is a flyer for the 105. So, if you're a team like Colts and you're just always acquiring pieces, great move to make. Saints now have more than likely their pick of one of the top 3 quarterbacks as their long-term anchor, and they just continue to build their way.
Yep. I don't know. I was shocked by this when it first happened. I like it a little bit more. But I guess the value will, like, my opinion changed with some of the trades that happened after this. Like, surprisingly enough, you might have been able to get more, but it was a good trade.
Yep. Again, because I can't go more than 2 trades without being involved, but thankfully, this is the last time I have to talk about my team in these last set of trades. Chase Brown in the 217, after I've just talked them up, moving to the Colts for the 132 and the Eagles 25 third. So, basically pricing Chase near where he was drafted in the NFL draft last year, or actually our draft last year. With that pick in the 17 to get to the 32 and a future third. So that just felt like good value to me, so happy to do it. We got a couple fill-ins here. Justin Shorter moving for the 415. Not a bad depth play by the Browns. Martin Emerson moving for the 430. Again, not a bad swipe by Chiefs as he starts picking off defensive goose pieces. And then Pat's trying to dump the Jared Stidham contract. This case, dumping him to the Texans because Texans being the first one who was able to get him an offer. So good on you, Texans, because there is a situation here where the Broncos cut Russell Wilson. They move up to get J.J. McCarthy and decide that he's not ready to start at the beginning of the season because he's 20 years old or 21 years old. And Stidham is the day one starter. So Texans may have just gotten another day one starter for free.
I want to touch on your previous trade with Colts. So he traded 132 and a third. And what was this, 2 days after he had traded you?
120. So he moved from 127 to 132 for a third. Then he gave a different future third back. Went from Chargers future third to your future third, which could be equivalent. I'd probably value yours as a little bit less valuable right now, but nonetheless, basically for the value of the 127 in his eye, got Chase Brown and 217.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's fine. Like, it's fine value, just seems excessive.
Yep.
That's just the crazy part of the league.
All right. And then the last of the fourth rounders switching hands, 402 going to the Bears for Jason Brownlee. He was one of the darlings from Hard Knocks with the Jets last year. Didn't really do much during the season. 5 catches, 56 yards, and a touchdown on 8 targets. Hope is that year 2 he can make a leap of sorts with Rodgers back in tow, since that was who he had a lot of his chemistry with last year. But then here come the big names for the last 3. So for those who fell asleep during the 4s that just happened and the freebies, wake yourself back up because here come the fun ones. Sam Howell and T. Higgins going from the Panthers to the Saints for Saquon Barkley and Uchenna Nwosu. Just
why? I just no.
The trade for the 105 made a lot of sense for me because that's likely going to be one of the top 3 quarterbacks. I think the top 5 are the top 3 quarterbacks and the top 2 receivers. So that's not exactly a hot take, but that's what I think. So he's going to get one of those guys. Excellent.
No, but if he's angling to get the Washington quarterback, this makes a little bit sense. I hate it slightly less, but I still hate it for Saints.
Right. So I mean, that's probably if it goes how it's supposed to go, I would expect that Drake May is going to be there, and Drake May is going to be the Washington quarterback, and he goes to the Saints there. So maybe he's making the like you said, maybe he's making the move before someone asks him to pay up for it and takes the risk that hey that happens, or that hey things go really sideways and Washington says f you, I'm taking Marvin Harrison Jr. there. Everyone else just piss off, which would just be a classic Commanders thing to do in real life. That
Yep.
would be great for Sam Howell, but
Yeah.
taking some risk. But I think overall a fair trade. Although I'd probably rather have Barkley and Nwosu.
Yep. But yeah, I guess I don't hate it as much as my initial reaction, because like the amount of like perceived value that Saints is giving up, like excess, is definitely like less than what if both of these players hit. I mean, sure you want to give up a little bit less, but he gets a player that'll probably play longer in T. Higgins and has potential to be like he got franchise tagged, but next year he may have the potential to be the guy somewhere. And then yeah, if Howell ends up being a starting quarterback, then this just ends up being a solid steal for Saints. So yeah, nice gamble.
Yeah, because I mean that would be the interesting thing is after Drake May gets taken, there's going to be nonstop draft conversation about what happens to Sam Howell now. Who comes up against Sam Howell. So I think just based off of that, we're going to see him move on day 2 or day 3 for either a third or a fourth round pick in the NFL draft, and then be in a competition someplace like Pittsburgh would be a great move for them to instead of if they can't get Fields or can't agree to a reasonable price on Fields and decides okay we'll get Sam Howell instead to compete with Mason Rudolph and Kenny Pickett, that's not a bad use of a 4th round pick. Keeps your first 3 rounds free to hit other needs. Again, we shall see. Next pick, even though it's big name, is mostly just satisfying the tag bidding. Patriots giving the 129 to the 49ers for Brock Purdy, all 116,550,000 of him. So enjoy. And then last and certainly not least, Broncos giving up the hard-earned 102 for Jalen Hurts and Tuli. I will never pronounce his last name correctly, but he's a damn good D end and the starting edge for the Chargers. Had a great rookie season last year and should only continue to grow this year. I just love this trade.
Yeah, a perfectly fine trade. Based on this, I am now accepting any. I'm open to offers on the 101. Just has to be better than this. It's a bit much for a pick. Like the 102, like hopefully will turn into somebody like a Jalen Hurts. Just for far less than $30 million. So I would rather have Hurts in this scenario, but yeah, I guess this is the price you have to pay for a pick in a draft where there are some very hyped quarterbacks.
Yep. And then now Bill has his quarterback in addition to Kirk Cousins. I think he's just also serving as a clearinghouse right now. Anything he gets is probably available. So this is not the end, I think, of where Hurts ends up. But I think, Bill is repositioning himself that, hey, Hurts may not be less than $1 million, but he's still a top 3, top 5 dynasty quarterback, worst case right now. Getting one of those is better than hey at 102 I'm probably gonna have to spend this to get what I hope is a top 5 dynasty quarterback. So making sure he gets one plus a solid D end, not a bad deal.
Yeah.
And then of course this allows the Commanders to lord over the Giants about who he's going to take and see if he can prize some capital from Giants to move from 2 to 3 in the process, or he just wants to torture him. I mean, he's going to get his money's worth just from being in the midst of 1, 2, and 3 being you, him, and Giants, 3 members of the NFC East. Just ridiculous.
Yeah, this is going to be pretty amusing. I am sad that Bill traded that pick away because I was hoping that we could just get a whole bunch of picks on the pod. But I don't know. I guess it spices up the early picks.
Well, I mean, look, and I would not be, it would not be fair of me to say this and not preface with, I'm sure Giants is going to feel a little picked on right now, and that's not the intent here. But, we've learned the tendencies of the teams that we draft with. Goose gets constantly picked on, and, I'll just kind of jump on him since we've been leaving him alone the last couple of weeks. He loves to acquire picks at the, end of the first round or early second round to sell. Whether it's, one pick that he chains together, or he'll, find a way to, right now he's got 211 and 215. He'll be on the clock and wait for 4 to 6 hours on those just to make sure people have enough time to wait and think and maybe overpay him for that. And he'll do that every time he's on the clock. And that's just what he is, how he does this. And he's been very successful in the league doing that. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. Giants the same kind of way. Is he paid a lot to get up to the 103. He's going to want a lot to move off the 103, and he's going to give people every opportunity to pay him that. So, I mean, this is not a dig. I would put the over-under at 6 or 7 hours of how long it's going to take the 103 to get made. So no matter how many are on the podcasts, we've got, I think, reasonably 2 sort of milestones in there of teams that are going to stop, hit the brakes, and say, I'm going to give people time to catch up and see if they want to pay me, an extra 20 or 30 cents on the dollar to get into this pick.
Well, luckily we have free agency to worry about before then.
Indeed. So plenty of stuff to come. I think, if we do a second pod this week, it'll be focused on the NFL draft, maybe talk about a little bit of what's happening at the combine, and, maybe a mock draft either of the real NFL draft or our top 20 or top 32 or something of that standpoint, to start getting everyone into the draft mindset, or even, free agency preview, all sorts of fun things that we can do. But we are rolled over. It is the new year. You're all a bunch of crazy degenerates, and I love you. I know I've said that 17 times tonight, but I'm going to continue to say it, and keep up the good work. Like I said, we'll just kind of see how the week goes. No promise one way or the other of another podcast this week, but everyone enjoy. I love the activity, love the teams shaping how they want this year to go for them, and that changing stories every 5 seconds. So until next time, keep up the good work.